Dear students, welcome back. Today, this session, let's discuss gender policies. Gender policies in different countries. Gender policies across countries reveal diverse strategies for challenging structural inequality, which is shaped by history, political will, welfare regimes, and feminist movements. A comparative lens highlights both progressive frameworks such as gender quotas, parity laws, and gender budgeting, and persistent implementation gaps linked to culture, institutions, and power relations. Conceptualizing gender policy. Now, gender policy can be understood as a set of laws, institutional mechanisms and programs that seeks to address gender-based inequalities in political representation, economic resources, bodily autonomy, and care work. From a gender studies perspective, these policies operate within broader regimes of patriarchy and neoliberal globalization, meaning that formal equality on paper often coexists with substantive inequalities in practice. Feminist scholars therefore distinguished between gender neuter, gender specific, and gender transformative policies, arguing that only the latter explicitly aim to redistribute power and resources and to challenge discriminatory norms. At the global level, normative frameworks such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is also popularly known as CEDAW, the Beijing Platform for Action, and the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 5 on gender equality, provide reference points for domestic policy design. International indices such as the Global Gender Gap Index and the Gender Inequality Index GII are used to track progress and to benchmark national performance across dimensions of health, education, economic participation, and political empowerment. These instruments can both incentivize reforms and obscure internal inequalities, for instance, between rural and urban women or between cisgender and LGBTQIA plus populations. Political representation and gender quotas. One of the most visible arenas of gender policy is political representation, where legislated gender quotas, reserved seats, and voluntary party quotas have reshaped parliaments in many regions. Quotas can be designed as reserved seats, which guarantee a minimum number of seats for women in legislatures. Legislated candidate quotas also requires parties to field certain percentage of women candidates. Voluntary party quotas are adopted internally by political parties, often under feminist or social democratic pressure. Rwanda is widely cited as a striking case, with women holding more than 60% of lower house parliamentary seats, supported by constitutional reserved seats and strong post-genocide commitments to inclusion. Several Latin American countries such as Mexico and Argentina have moved from quotas to parity laws requiring that candidate lists alternate women and men and the women be placed in winnable positions, leading to near equal representation in normal legislatures. Nordic countries, including Sweden and Norway, have achieved high levels of women's representation primarily through party level quotas and long term welfare state investments that support care, work family reconciliation, and egalitarian norms. However, gender studies scholars caution that descriptive representation does not automatically translate into substantive representation of women's diverse interests, particularly when women elected under quota systems face tokenism, weak leadership positions, or patriarchal party structures. Effective quota design therefore requires enforcement mechanism, placement mandates, sanctions for non-compliance, and complementary measures such as feminist training, cross-party women's caucuses, and collaboration with civil society. Economic policies, gender budgeting, and work in the economic sphere. Gender policies, all these address gaps in labor force participation, pay, occupational segregation, and access to assets. Many emerging economies have adopted equal pay legislation, parental leave schemes, and childcare policies, yet gender pay gaps and sticky floors at the bottom of labor markets persist. Feminist economists argue that conventional macroeconomic policy often treats labor as gender neutral, ignoring unpaid care work and informal economies in which women and marginalized gender groups are overrepresented. Gender responsive budgeting have emerged as a key tool for making state finances visible from a gender perspective by assessing how tax and expenditure policies differentially affect women and men and relocating resources accordingly. UNDP supported gender budgeting initiatives across African and Asian countries, including pilots in Mauritius and provisions in Nigeria's fiscal responsibility legislation integrate gender priorities into sectoral budgets and planning. In India, multiple state level and sectoral initiatives documented as good practices in gender mainstreaming focus on women's economic empowerment, access to livelihoods, and social protection, illustrating how budgetary and programmatic tools can be aligned with gender equality goals. However, even where gender budgeting or equality pay law exists, gender labor markets often remain stratified by class, caste, race, and migration status, limiting the transformative potential of policy. Informalization, austerity, and digitization can erode labor protections and shift care burdens back into households, which disproportionately affects women and girls. A gender studies approach therefore foregrounds intersectionality, asking how economic policies impact, for example, rural women, domestic workers, or LGBTQI persons differently from urban middle class women in formal employments. Let's now understand social policy, care, and bodily autonomy. Social policy is another crucial dimension of gender policy, encompassing health, education, social security, care services, and measures addressing gender based violence. Countries vary significantly in their approaches to parental leave, childcare, and family benefits. Nordic welfare regimes tend to offer generous parental leave with non-transferable father quotas and universal childcare, which has supported higher women's labor force participation and more egalitarian sharing of care. In contrast, contexts with residual or familialist welfare system often rely on women's unpaid work, reinforcing traditional gender roles and limiting women's economic independence. Sexual and reproductive health and rights policy is centered to bodily autonomy, yet this remains highly contested in many states. Argentina's 2020 law legalizing abortion on request up to 14 weeks, embedded within a broader sexual reproductive health rights framework, illustrate how feminist mobilization and state commitment can expand rights despite conservative resistance. At the same time, global backlash movements and regressive reforms in some countries show that gains in sexual reproductive health rights and LGBTQIA rights are reversible and require continuous political defense. Policies on gender-based violence, including domestic violence, sexual harassment, and harmful practices, often exist alongside weak and enforcement, under-resourced services, and victim-blaming cultures. Many countries have adopted comprehensive laws following the Council of Europe's Istanbul Convention or similar regional frameworks, but feminist analysis highlights the need of survivor-centered approaches, intersectional understanding of risk, and attention to carceral versus transformative justice models. Governance, mainstreaming, and global frameworks. Gender mainstreaming and integration of gender perspective into all stages of policy development, implementation, and evaluation is now a dominant strategy in international and national governance. UN agencies such as UN Women and UNICEF operate with institutional gender policies and action plans that mandate gender analysis across sectors, supported by country-level focal points and capacity building. Evaluations of these frameworks show how mainstreaming has increased awareness and generated gender-responsive indicators in some areas. It can also become technocratic and superficial when not accompanied by political commitment and accountability. UN Women's Resilience in Disasters Policy Tracker, which is also called WRD, which reviewed 266 laws, policies, and frameworks in 193 member states, revealed uneven inclusion of gender and of high-risk groups such as rural women, persons with disabilities, and LGBTQIA+ individuals. Countries like Argentina, Canada, New Zealand, and Nepal were cited as good practice examples for including LGBTQ+ communities and multiple high-risk groups in disaster and climate-related frameworks, demonstrating how intersectional gender policy can be operationalized. In parallel, the Women, Peace and Security agenda has led many states to adopt national action plans of women's participation, protection, and prevention in conflict and post-conflict settings, again with variable implementation and strong reliance on civil society advocacy. Let's look into comparative snapshots between Rwanda, Sweden, and India. The diversity of gender policy approaches became visible when we compared Rwanda, Sweden, and India. These three countries often cited in policy debates. Rwanda, Sweden, India's political representation, constitutionally guaranteed reserved seats, and legalized quotas have produced the world's highest share of women in parliament, exceeding 60% in the lower house. High levels of women's representation achieved through voluntary party quotas, strong social democratic traditions, and gender equality norms brought out all these changes. One-third reservation for women and rural and urban local bodies recently extended to national and state legislatures in principle, but women's representation remains lower in many state assemblies. Economic and social policy, post-genocide reconstruction integrated gender equality into national development plans, women's land rights and access to education, though rural-urban gaps persist. Comprehensive welfare state with generous parental leave, subsidized childcare, and active labor market policy supports women's employment work-family balance. A mix of targeted schemes, example cash transfers, self-help groups and constitutional commitments to equality, regional disparities and class stratification limit equal outcomes. Governance and mainstreaming. Strong institutional mechanisms for gender equality, including the Gender Monitoring Office, helps, but challenges remain in shifting deep seated norms. Institutionalized gender mainstreaming across ministries and municipalities, supported by data system and equality bodies, multiple gender machinery bodies, and mainstreaming initiatives with UNDP, UN Women supported gender budgeting and good practice pilots across cities help. From a gender studies viewpoint, these case studies show that high performance on one dimension, whether it is descriptive representation in Rwanda or welfare entitlements in Sweden, does not guarantee comprehensive transformation of gender relations, particularly when intersecting inequalities and cultural norms. India, with its scale and diversity, illustrates both the potential of constitutional and policy reforms, such as the local government, reservations, and gender mainstreaming in development programs, and the limits imposed by structural hierarchies and uneven implementation. Today's case study, that is Rwanda's gender policy. Rwanda's gender policy framework offers a compelling case for analyzing how gender policy can be integrated to the state construction and nation building after conflict. Following the 1994 genocide, the new government explicitly framed gender equality as essential to rebuilding institutions, promoting reconciliation and accelerating development, recognizing women's central role in sustaining households and communities. This political framing provided an enabling context for far-reaching gender reforms. The 2003 Constitution mandated that women must occupy at least 30% of decision-making positions in all public institutions as a threshold subsequently exceeded in the Chamber of Deputies through reserved seats and party lists that have delivered over 60% women MPs. Additional legal reforms, including the 1999 Inheritance Law and the 2005 Land Law, strengthened women's rights to own and inherit property, which had been severely constrained under customary regimes. Gender equality objectives were also integrated into Vision 2020 and sectoral strategies in education, health, and agriculture, which was supported by gender-responsive budgeting guidelines. Interviews with policy actors and civil society representatives in Rwanda highlight several strategies used to advance gender equality, including high-level political leadership, coordination between the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion and other ministries, and the creation of Gender Monitoring Office with powers to track compliance. Partnerships with UN agencies and donors facilitated capacity building, data systems, and programmatic innovations such as local development programs that targeted rural women's economic empowerment. Civil society organizations, including women's groups, have advocated for policy change and monitored implementation, although space for critical feminist voices can be constrained by broader political political dynamics. Despite these notable achievements, feminist analysis point to ongoing challenges in translating formal equality into transformed gender relations. Critics note that women's high presence in parliament does not always translate to autonomous feminist agendas, particularly when party discipline and national unity narratives limit dissent. Furthermore, domestic violence, unpaid care burdens, and gendered labor market segmentation persists, especially in rural areas. They are also concerned that rapid policy changes can outpace shifts in social norms, placing the burden of gender equality on individual women without fully engaging men or altering institutional cultures. This Rwandan case demonstrates how gender policy can be embedded in constitutional design, electoral rules, land and family law, and national development planning in ways that produce measurable gains in representation and rights. At the same time, it illustrates core themes in gender studies: the difference between formal and substantive equality, the importance of intersectionality in assessing outcomes, and the tension between state led gender reforms and autonomous feminist mobilization. For students of gender and public policy, Rwanda thus offers both an inspiring example of what is possible when political will and institutional mechanisms align with each other, and also it is a reminder that gender justice is an ongoing, contested process rather than a finished product. Thank you.